So welcome back to F.A.C.E, Angie.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, what a great time to have you since our last conversation. If you want
Oh,
to share your screen,
no, you
we,
can
you know, we had
continue.
those, we had those long-term bases developing in the grain complex, and
Hmm.
we had breakouts and, $11 beans and wheat and corn rallying with beans to different degrees.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this question.
Dale,
I'm go,
do
yeah.
you at least want to share the screen so it's not empty?
yeah.
Oh,
Feel free to just throw up some charts. I don't have anything to
oh,
share with you. I never
oh,
come prepared with charts, so I'll let you
okay.
guys. Yeah,
All right. Yeah, sure.
I'm just a dirty old fundamental trader that can watch support and resistance. So I'll
Okay.
let you guys throw the screen on. But
Okay. So let's talk about these grains. And, here's the picture in beans
yeah,
daily. Look at that. So it looked like we broke out over about 920. Tremendous advance there. Corn,
yeah.
not bad either. And wheat has been, bringing up the rear. So tell me about the durability of a bull market in grains, Angie.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Right. Are we working our way towards a next leg higher or are we not? And obviously, when I was on here a couple months ago, I was not in the camp that we were. Now, the hardest part with grains, obviously, is that weather is so hard to really forecast, and your guess is as good as mine, much beyond 5 days out. And so we really were strong because of the epic export pace that we had seen. Really kind of a surprising export pace. China came out of nowhere and just started buying everything they possibly could.
The
Um,
Chinese?
yes,
Yeah,
the
okay.
Chinese. And I
Hmm.
still feel like there has to be a story behind it. And maybe that story is the simple reason, right? The simplest reason is usually the one that it is. And maybe they had depleted their stockpiles waiting out the last 2 years and had run into a production issue on their grains at home, which they still won't admit. Last week, they came out with a crop estimate, the Chinese did, and said that it was the same as a year ago, although their demand structure definitely is not the same as what it was a year ago. So you really saw that Chinese surprise with them coming in and buying a large amount of both, corn, wheat, soybeans, especially soybeans.
What do
And
they
then
produce? Are they bean producers in China, Angie?
they have enough beans to say that they produce beans, but not enough to really put them on the
Feed the
map when it
population.
comes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a small amount. The hardest part with China is there's a bit of a mistrust when it comes to seed
Everything?
technology, that
Uh-huh.
too. But especially the seed technology, which is part of the reason that they had come over and purchased Syngenta. For reference, China produces about just under 18 million metric ton of beans a year. The U.S. Produces around, well, it doesn't make sense to me. The U.S. produces about 4 billion bushel. And so the China, I'd have to look at that math there. But when you're looking at, oh, sorry, I was looking at oil, that would be why. When you look at soybean supplies, China production is about 17.5 million metric ton. The U.S. is 113
Oh, yeah,
million metric
dwarfed.
ton. So that
Okay.
just kind of puts it into perspective for you that China is definitely an importer. They're estimated to import about 100 million metric ton this year. Some folks are saying that number is too low. Some are pointing at soybean stocks at ports levels and saying that number, could be right. It could be a touch too high. And so we're just kind of waiting to see what they do as we move ahead and if the USDA needs to increase carry out or not.
Oh,
Because basically
okay.
right now, carry out is a record low. It's the lowest it's been in 7 years projected right now.
Okay. Well, normally there's some type of balance between what we do as grain producers and what Brazil does.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if Brazil's production numbers or their carryover is also showing, bullish type of market conditions. Maybe COVID affected farming down there more than here. What's your take on Brazil being an offset to this recent run in beans and
Yeah,
the other
Brazil's
grains.
really been kind of part of what the run has been, because they're currently in their production season down there. Basically, we'll start to see some early harvest of soybeans late next month, into February and March, and they have been exceptionally dry for Brazil. So this is what gets really confusing when you're starting to come in as an outside observer and look at what's taking place from a Brazilian production standpoint. Simply because Brazil tends to, they're a rainforest, right? They're a tropical climate. They tend to receive a significant amount of rain, well above what it takes to really produce a good soybean crop. And that's part of the reason why they're able to consistently produce a good crop down there, is because they do get that rainfall that we may miss in some locations here in the US, in the Corn Belt in particular. And so they are well below normal. If you take a look at monthly rainfall amounts and things of that nature, their rainfall has been exceptionally below normal coming into this year. And then as they've started the growing season, they've run into some issues with La Nina and seen some continued below normal precipitation fall. Now, the question going forward is, it's early enough in a lot of areas of Brazil to really kind of correct, stabilize, and even support production outlook, because they have that amount of time to really kind of work their way towards the end of the year. And so the $1 million question is, does La Nina start to break down? Do we start to see some heavier rainfall? Does it help to save that later planted crop and then provide a good amount of moisture for their safrinha crop or their second crop of corn that gets planted after their soybean harvest and is responsible for about 75% of their overall corn production? We're really watching to see what that weather is. So Brazil is definitely influencing what's taking place in the market structure right now, just simply because our carryout outlook in soybeans and to some extent in corn is relatively tight, comparatively speaking, and therefore we can't really afford, given the global supply and demand situation, we can't necessarily afford to have a major production issue in South America at this point. And so we're going to be watching and holding our breath.
Okay, well, here's a pretty interesting inverse correlation. So here's a look at the beans, Angie.
Yep.
And this is a weekly chart. And here is a look of the dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what percentage, I know we're talking supply demand, but what percentage of it could be based upon dollar weakness at nominal gains based on dollar weakness? Could that be part of it?
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think there is a level of, like the last commentator was saying about the buy gold and wait, right? And that sort of commodities, the hedge when it comes to losing the dollar, losing the value in the dollar has always been kind of commodity ownership, wanting to have something, that hurts when you drop it on your toe. That was always the conversation and the idea behind, that inflation trade and all of these things that we've been hearing about, quite actively over the last couple months. And so I do think there's a factor in that. I think that the weakness in the dollar is helping keep our exports competitive. That's across the board, wheat, corn, and soybeans. As it does, a weaker dollar, obviously helps your ability to export. And I think there's a hedge on the idea that we see continued dollar weakness. I mean, there's some folks out there, they're talking the upper 70s, right, as a target in the dollar. And obviously that would encourage a level of inflation and help support our level of potential exports and really kind of keep this market on its toes. So you've had a perfect storm, right, of information that really would have been difficult to foresee when we started the summer, and we're still, kind of in the throes of COVID, and the USDA had a 3 billion bushel corn carryout number, and all of these things. Like I will be doing this for another 30 years probably, and we'll be talking about 2020 as the year that, we went from 0 to 60 exceptionally quickly when it came to markets. If you just look back, you'll see, multi-year lows all of a sudden transformed into multi-year highs here And it felt like
Yeah, I
overnight.
can't remember a period like this
No.
in market history. So, I mean, the last pandemic, I really wasn't trading. I was still in
True. Yeah.
grammar school. And you know what, Angie, I did drop an ear of corn on my foot, and it didn't hurt. But
It didn't.
I
Oh.
have corns on my feet now. But anyway, so getting back to the grains, you have a preference as far as are there any pairing trades like long beans, short corn, or intermarket long
I
bean,
mean,
short wheat, anything like that?
yeah, I would say if you really, and it's always scary to look at any of these, right? Because a lot of times an intercommodity spread is not necessarily, I mean, you can make anything a spread if you try hard enough, right? But
Right.
if you look at corn and wheat right now, the typical premium in wheat versus corn ends up being should be around $1.35. Right now that's sitting about $1.70 after the big run up in wheat here that we saw, $1.78, $1.79. And looking at March versus March right now would put you at minus 426. That's gonna put you at about $1.83. And so, I would say that wheat in comparison to corn could be a good trade. So sell wheat, buy corn, if you were really looking at trying to trade an intercommodity. It's not
Okay.
necessarily my cup of tea because I'm
It's
a
probably
physical
simpler
trader.
just to be just buy support in all of them
Right, that's
on
probably
dips.
the best. And
Yeah.
everyone kind of says buy pullbacks. I mean, the reality is though with wheat, this Russian export tax story is what's hit wheat here recently. If you look at wheat just in the weekly chart, we're currently
Right here.
40 cents above the low last week that we hit. I think we
Yeah.
traded down to 668, I believe. And so we really saw this huge rally in wheat on a Russian export tax story. The last time we traded higher on a Russian export tax story.
70s.
Yeah. Well, in 14 and 15, they did come out. They had a much larger crop. They had exported a significantly amount less prior to this story coming out. And it really ended up being bearish wheat overall because what tends to happen is it doesn't fix your domestic food inflation problems. You'd be further ahead just to write a check to your folks struggling with food purchases and continue to allow for relatively free market wheat exports just simply because the farmer tends to shut off the sales once they realize that, okay, if I just hold out until June when the next crop comes along, I can export this wheat without any sort of issue. And especially if you don't know what your new crop's going to look like, it makes sense to hold it for a hedge. So it tends to backfire. And that's really, if I were to pick one thing that I'm kind of like, okay, there isn't really any additional stories. And once we trade through this Russian wheat export tax story, after that, there really isn't anything. The Russian crop is huge. The rest of the wheat crop it's sleeping now, other than in the southern hemisphere, where they're harvesting wheat, every month, basically, there's a wheat harvest across the globe. The next thing we're gonna be looking at is
planting.
Planted acres. Yeah. Most of the crop was planted in the fall. The winter wheat area was, and the price was above 6 for new crop wheat. And so that really encouraged a significant increase in planted acres. And I would imagine that the January report is going to show that. And so I would say the market that has the most bearish information stacked up against it is wheat, although the dollar is going to influence that. Like you were talking, wheat tends to be a lot more closely aligned to what the dollar is doing than the other two crops. Everything else is going to be dependent South America and whether or not we continue to see this huge aggressive export pace, around the world.
Okay, so when we look at these markets, Angie, and planting coming up, you're saying there's a La Nina. El Nino is more of a worry for the U.S. grain belt, right? Than La Nina.
Yeah.
So there won't be as much of a drought watch out over the U.S. with that happening.
If we can see a correction to what we have right now, we're definitely going to be watching the drought conditions as we've seen the western drought that has caused so much issue here over the last year is starting to spread east. Some old timers will tell you it's the southeast drought you have to worry about, not the west to east drought. But I think everyone has an old timer sort of tale that they can use for anything in agriculture. So we'll definitely be watching it. Dry conditions tend to encourage rapid planting pace and tend to give us more corn than soybeans, just because once the planters are able to go, they're going to go. So it's not necessarily so much what happens as we work our way into planting, but obviously the rainfall that happens after the fact, especially if our subsoil moisture is depleted. So we'll continue to watch that. La Nina can influence the southern plains, which we've seen an exceptionally dry fall, which is part of why you've seen wheat rally there as well, is because the southern plains wheat areas has been under somewhat stressful conditions. And so we'll continue to watch. The world or Mother Nature is not done with us yet, I don't think. And so that'll be something that we definitely will be paying attention to, as we work our way through the next 5-6 months.
Anything to look for out of a new administration when it takes power and with the new USDA secretary?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. One of the things that we kind of enjoyed a little bit more with the former USDA was a bit more inconsistency with how they made determinations across the board when it came to crop outlooks and things of that nature. So we'll be maybe hoping to return to a semblance of normalcy with that. Over the last 10 months here, we've had 4 different unprecedented USDA report adjustments, which that may have nothing to do with the administration. You know what I mean? Like that it may have absolutely zero to do with that. But it seems odd to have, like 4 in a row that were major adjustments that no one had seen prior. And really had no reasoning. There was no explanation behind the adjustments that were made. So we'll be wondering if we kind of settle back into a semblance of normalcy on that side. Obviously, we'll be watching what the Chinese relationship, will look like going forward. That's going to be big. And then whether or not the SREs, those small refinery exemptions that were there was a huge uptick in those throughout this past administration here, which basically meant that the small refineries, if any refinery could kind of prove that they were unjustly feeling pressure due to the ethanol blending mandate or the need to buy RINs, they could kind of petition to the EPA, and the EPA would let them out of their obligation, under the renewable fuels standards. So there'll be a question as to what that looks like going forward. They were already deemed illegal in an appeals court, but nothing has been done, by the administration to kind of remedy that. So we'll be watching to see what that means for ethanol. Ethanol obviously is a huge influence on corn. And then obviously, like I said, the China thing is going to be probably the biggest.
Do you have a Jensen or one of those? I think they're called digesters. Chicken farmers have them, and the problem is that the waste creates methane. Which right? Yeah. So I mean, in fact, I have a friend that's transitioned into that business. And do you think that the new administration, since they talk about really wanting to go green, will extend tax credits for farmers to get this type of thing, because it would generate enough power to be able to sell to utility companies?
Yeah, we actually, one of the chicken feeders that I sell corn into up north of here went through this entire process over a decade ago to get that set up, and they were able to sell electricity back into the grid and still power all of the places, their feed mills and everything that they were doing. So yeah, I mean,
it's expensive, but comes back
I think
to
it's
them.
worth it long term. Yeah. And so that's one of the biggest things I'm kind of looking forward to with the new administration. I worry that obviously there's some unintended consequences that can tend to come from some of the conservation push. We're seeing that in Canada right now when it comes to some of these carbon taxes and things of that nature. So there is that underlying concern that comes with, perhaps an increase in regulation that is not is a one size fit all in an industry that is not one size fit all. So there is that concern, but I'm super excited to see what we can come up with when it comes to abilities to produce renewable fuel. I'm a huge wind power person. I like it. I get there's a lot of people that'll say, from a cost to efficiency standpoint and things of that nature. But I just like working to harness, natural fuel producers in a way that, really kind of benefits everyone. So I am excited to see what that would bring about. It's obviously a good thing. There's a lot of methane that is produced via, any type of animal production.
Right.
So it would be really cool to see that captured and
Yeah.
all of those things that we could see. And I would love to see a return in, investment when it comes to that. We saw that big with the W administration, and then it was continued with Obama. And so it would be nice to return to a level of that, without
Okay.
high fuel prices being the only reason why.
Well, the whole agricultural industry really had a tough year or so between trade wars,
Yeah.
pandemics, etc. I'm assuming with this recent rally in grain prices that there must be some healing taking
Yes.
place in the farm sector now, right?
Yeah, there's definitely more confidence in what we're seeing as we move ahead. It was quite dire in March and April. Or, the biggest concern is not having ethanol production anymore, and in addition to that, losing livestock producers because of the backup that we saw in processing capacity there too. So
people are fleeing New York and the major metropolitan areas. Are they buying 100-acre estates in Iowa and Indiana and
that's
Illinois,
the
Angie?
conversation. Yeah, I mean that's the talk, right? Is that you're going to see
Are you
folks,
seeing it
leaving
at
again.
all?
I feel like to a certain extent, I feel like we are. My husband, my family, we live just outside of the Lansing area, and I feel like we are seeing a massive increase in more rural subdivisions, so to speak. So you're 10 minutes from all of the things, but you're still in a neighborhood, because living on your own, living rural is all fun and games until you look around and there's no one to help if you need it. So we're seeing a definite change there. I think if you looked out west, you would see it. I think population centers are starting to change. Always kind of a certain level of careful what you wish for. A lot of folks are like, come to our small town, and it's like, yes, it's great, but people, things change, which is awesome too. But yeah, we're definitely seeing that. Hopefully that'll help kind of continue to increase the investments that we're seeing in rural broadband and things of that nature.
The only thing permanent is change, Angie.
Exactly.
And being the goddess of grains, I'm happy that your kingdom and universe is going through a period of perhaps some very good prosperity over the coming years with higher prices and the ability to sell into market. So appreciate you being here, Angie. Merry Christmas to
Merry
you
Christmas
and your
to you.
family. Happy New Year. And I appreciate you being here and, as you say, giving us all those dirty fundamentals and
right.
charts back them up by Trading Warrior Sisters. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Have a good one, and we will see you next year, right?
Okay, Angie. Yes, Angie Setzeri. Find her on Twitter at Goddess of Grain. Do you have a website address you want to give out, Angie?
You can check out Citizens Elevator LLC or the businessendoffarming.com.
Okay, that's a wrap. All right, everyone. Don't just count your bushels, count your blessings, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. Good hunting the rest of the day. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. This is a sector that I urge people to put on their watch list and look for opportunities. And that's a wrap. You're welcome, Tom. See everyone tomorrow for Turnaround Tuesday. Adios.